I'm Joe Kane.
I'm Dan Kane.
I'm Sal Conca.
And I'm Wayne Heckler.
And this is the Imperfect Podcast.
Don't forget to check us out at hecklerkane.com and download our episodes for free on iTunes and SoundCloud.
To the bumper.
Today on the Imperfect Podcast, we have Gene Blalock.
Gene's an award-winning Los Angeles-based director, and he's known for his touching, heartwarming films as much as his eccentric, short horror vignettes. He's the founder of the film production company Seraph Films, and we're really excited to talk to him. He's done a number of different works called Amongst the Shadows, which is a short film you can find on YouTube. He's got a documentary coming out.
7 Days in Mexico.
7 Days in Mexico.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, it looks really cool. The cinematography's done really well, and it's a really interesting story about a musician that has kind of lost his way, and he's trying to figure out where to get his love for music back.
Yeah. So let's talk to Gene.
So, Gene, welcome to the Imperfect Podcast. How are you doing this evening?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. It's all good.
Awesome. Thanks for hanging out with us. We know our good friend Wendy over at Studio Matrix wanted to give her a shout out and introduced us. You're out in LA, is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, here in Los Angeles.
Cool.
Very rainy today, but it is what it is. So.
Are you getting some tropical weather out there finally?
Yeah, it's definitely today. So
now, Gene is the founder of independent film production company Seraph Films. So I want to introduce that.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. And, so
sometimes Wayne has a mind of his own.
Yes.
don't just ignore him. We're called the Imperfect Podcast for a reason. But how long have you been making films out in LA?
it's been about 5 years now. I came out to LA as a musician from Chicago. My band got picked up by a label out here, but. Yeah, so the first few years I was here in LA, I was doing music, and now films. So yeah, about 5 years.
Okay, cool. So how did you make that transition? What was the transition from music to film? Were you just shooting music videos for a bunch of pals and decided to pick up the camera, or
I went to film school in Chicago for one. So yeah, that was my initial goal, was doing film in Chicago, and then got sidetracked with having a band and doing music, and then jumped back into it about 5 years ago. So,
okay, cool. Does the band still exist in any iteration?
Not really. You can definitely Google and find iterations of the band back then, but no, it's pretty much full-time filmmaking these days. So
cool. So, what was the first film you worked on professionally?
It was a little film called Unlucky Girl. It was a vampire a zombie film that my friend James and I decided to try and make a few years ago. So yeah.
Okay. What was zombie film? I mean, is that a genre, horror films? Is that what you particularly like going for?
Well, we do a lot of horror films, but Unlucky Girl came from this thing that I was taking a break from music and decided to try and make some films, and my friend James was like, "Oh, let's do this cool little zombie thing that that he had this idea for." It was almost like a music video for one of his films, for one of his songs that he wanted to do, and yeah, it went from there. But we do a lot of horror films, but it's not exclusively what we do. So.
Sure, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into a bunch of the work that you're doing right now. But before we get there, I mean, what really drives you to make movies? I mean, what was your inspiration to go to film school? Were you a theater kid? Have you been in front of the camera and behind the camera? So what was the motivation really to going to film school and making movies?
Yeah, I've always been the emotional, drama kid, I guess. So, but my desire to be in front of the camera these days is not something that happens. I have no desire to be in front of the camera these days. But yeah, I've always kind of been interested in how you make films, how this comes to be. So yeah, so.
Cool. And obviously going to film school, you've got some formal training. Is there an approach you kind of have to your films, or how do you develop scripts and produce? I mean, are you guys writing your own? Are you working with screenwriters? What's your process like at Seraph?
Yeah, no, it started off me kind of writing everything and kind of doing everything on my own, but now I have various partners that we team up with that do different scripts and stuff. So yeah, for sure. I have writing partners that I work with these days. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're one of those guys who've done everything in the business as far as it goes, just to get the film done. Is there a particular avenue that you prefer, like being a director, being a cinematographer, being a writer? Is there anything? What do you lean towards?
Oh, I definitely lean to just directing things these days. But coming up through the independent film community, you definitely have to kind of do a little bit of everything.
Uh-huh.
And I certainly have done everything from writing to directing to cinematography and everything else. But these days, definitely prefer just being director. So.
Sure. And as an indie filmmaker, I mean, the company that you've built over the last few years, what do you really find? How has the industry changed over the last couple of years in terms of distribution and finding funding? I mean, do you guys crowdfund? That's probably a lot of questions in one there, but
it's never been a better time to be an independent filmmaker, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
We've certainly have done everything from having funding to crowdfunding to everything else. But yeah, it's never been a better time to be a filmmaker for sure, because you get to write and create and then actually fund it and then go from there. So yeah.
Sure. And what do you guys do? You self-distribute? Are you using a lot of streaming platforms these days? Are you using any of the progressive tools like Distribber to get your films out there?
So far, we YouTube has been the biggest single biggest outlet for us as far as distribution goes. The feature we're working on right now that we're going to shoot in May or June, we're not sure where it's going to land as far as distribution goes. But yeah, distributor is definitely one that we're thinking about and going from there. Yeah, so.
What's the name of that film? What's the name of the film you're working on right now?
It's called The Nightmare Gallery.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
I've seen a lot of your horror vignettes. They're pretty cool. The House was really cool. That actor, Nicholas Jacqua, I think it's pronounced, was really cool.
Nicholas we work with a lot, yeah. He's a cool individual, yeah, for sure. So
yeah, that was well done. I really enjoyed that one.
Well, we actually have a mutual friend. Tonya Kay was on our podcast late last year. And
oh, really? Yeah, Tanya's great, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I actually messaged her this morning because I was like, hey, we're actually interviewing Gene tonight. I know you're working with him in The Art of Murder. So how did you find Tonya, or how do you know Tonya, and what's The Art of Murder all about?
Well, when we started Horror Haiku, there was this one character, the artist, and it has kind of recreated through, continued through multiple series of Horror Haiku. Tonya, I honestly don't know how I honestly can't remember how I met her, but it was just another vegan filmmaker that was like, oh yeah, you should know this person, and yeah, so I honestly don't remember how I met Tonya.
Is there a whole community of vegan filmmakers that get together for like powwows or like?
In LA, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so I honestly can't remember how I met Tonya, but well, through some connections, Tonya was brought up to me, and she became the artist that ended up being in 4 seasons of Horror Haiku, I think it was. So.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. And she definitely did mention that one of the bonds you guys had was that you were both vegans, but she said that you were also a pleasure to be with on set, and that you were a great director to work with. So obviously lots of kudos from Tonya, and we love her.
Well, it's very nice of her to say.
Yeah, she was an awesome guest. I know that movie is still in production, correct?
Well, it's an idea that we have that we want to do at some point, a feature-length film called The Art of Murder, based off her character in Horror Haiku.
Gotcha.
It hasn't come to fruition yet, but it's there, and hopefully one day we'll get to make it. So.
Well, let's talk about Horror Haiku. That's something that is on your YouTube channel that's pretty unique. It involves the community and other folks. Can you give a little bit of background on Horror Haiku and how that idea came about?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly how it came about, other than that we had just finished a web series for a different production company that hired us to do a weekly anthology series, and it was quite miserable actually for the company that hired us. But I remember us thinking like, wow, we should really do something for YouTube. That I think we can do this and make it happen for our own channel. And so James Boring came up with this idea of, he's like, oh, well, let's do a horror anthology, and we'll do horror haiku where people leave different haikus, and we'll make them into separate episodes. And that's kind of how it happened. And so since then we've done that. It went on hiatus for a little while because we were just busy with other outlets and other films and things like that. And we're getting ready to bring it back in about a week and a half. I think we're going to bring it back for 10 more episodes. So yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, webisodes and web series are definitely hot these days to get your name out there and getting building a social audience and all that type of stuff. How important is the marketing aspect for you guys? I mean, are you using YouTube as your primary source of finding new audiences, or are you using other social media platforms as well?
Well, we try to use all the social media outlets, of course, but YouTube's definitely been the main outlet for growing audiences and trying to make the things happen for us. So yeah.
Cool.
Now, one thing I saw online was your Scary Christmas. That was the wrap-up of 2014. I know Joe would love that because you're so into Halloween, like Nightmare Before Christmas or something. What gave you the idea to do a Christmas, but more toward Halloween?
Well, it started, I think this is the 4th year we've done it so far, and it was just a year-end wrap-up party. Basically what happened is that we had our studio space out in Burbank and decided, well, let's do a year-end wrap-up party, kind of give out awards and such for things that, for people that we appreciated for the year, and our executive producers and such. So it just kind of stemmed from that, and then was like, well, we do a lot of horror, so it should be scary. So Scary Christmas, and again, another James Boring creation, Scary Christmas, and now we're 5 years in. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, as a horror enthusiast, what are your top 3 horror films on your list?
Oh, geez. Wow.
We've stumped him.
If I go back to when I was very young, and the things that scared me the most, the original Nightmare on Elm Street scared the crap out of me when I was so young, because I wasn't even supposed to watch it, and then I was so young and watched it, and then I didn't sleep for 3 days straight. So you go back and watch it now, it's very dated and it doesn't work very well, but back then it was pretty scary. Exorcist, again, another one to this day that still kind of bothers me for some reason. Wow. Yeah, I don't know. Those two definitely is being very young when watching them. So.
And not to pigeonhole you just to horror. I know you've done other things. A Second Chance at Christmas, To Kristen with Love. You have Vendetta, My Activist Wife, the web series. So there's some cool things out there. It's not all just horror, but you're very versatile.
It's not all horror, but that's what we do most and what we're known for sure. So
Sure. And so, in that vein, though, we know you're working on a documentary that's coming out in April called 7 Days in Mexico. So what was the inspiration for that documentary? How do you know Johnny? I would assume that's a relationship that you probably had. I don't know that you'd go out and make a documentary with of that nature with somebody maybe you really didn't know, unless his story was that compelling that you found it. So give us some background there on 7 Days in Mexico.
Sure. Yeah, Johnny I met in Chicago, actually, when I was still living there in Chicago. A musician that I have a lot of respect for, and that I was actually a fan of his music before I even knew who he was. Met him in Chicago, and when I moved to LA, he was someone that was always there. I would go grab coffee with him and discuss relationships and stuff with him. And real recently, the way 7 Days in Mexico came about is that he and I, obviously developed a friendship, and then he and I would meet up for coffee or whatever. And one day he basically said to me, it was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to write another song. I think this is it. I think I'm done. I think I'm finished. And if I'm not writing this, if I'm not doing music, I don't know why I should be on this planet anymore. Mm-hmm. And that really struck me. And I was like, oh, wow, that would make a great documentary. And then like 2 weeks later, he called me and was like, okay, we've got the money. I'm going to go to Mexico and do these songs and try and find my love of music again. And so that's really how it came about. It was one of those things that just kind of organically happened. And
there's some beautiful cinematography that we shot.
We shot the documentary, and hopefully it'll be out soon.
And that's something that's close to all our hearts. You can see all the guitars in the back. Oh no, you don't have video. No, you do.
See us.
He can see us. We can't see him.
I can see you guys. Yeah, no, yeah.
Well, all musicians as well, filmmakers.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and Johnny's story, he's, for folks that don't know that are listening, he's part of the band called Human Drama. It's a alternative rock, gothic rock band formed in 1985, and he's been the only constant member in the band. So he says, I guess they've played more recently in 2011, 2015 and did some touring, but it sounds like with his struggles in the music industry and trying to validate, his career almost to himself, it sounds like it would be a really compelling story to tell and see how he makes a comeback, so to speak. I saw that he did put out a new album as well, I think, right? In 2000.
Yeah, he's working on a new record right now, actually. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that's awesome. I mean, I think that's something that's going to be really cool. Are you going to festival with that? Like, what's your approach for releasing projects like this? Is that something that you're going to go to festival with, or are you just going to release it direct?
I'm not so sure here in the U.S. In Mexico, it's all, we have distribution and everything's already set up. But here in the U.S., I'm not so sure. We'll probably do some festivals. We'll probably do some screenings here in the U.S., but apart from that, I don't know yet. So,
okay, cool. So, what's other than the documentary? Any other projects that are upcoming that people should be looking out for?
Well, we're getting ready to start on our first narrative feature here in in L.A. It's a Nightmare Gallery, which will be, I think we're starting shooting in April or May. So,
okay,
yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, this has been great, Gene. I really appreciate you coming on and for all of your time. I think, our fans, if you want to give them a shout out for where they can find you, Seraph Films, or any Twitter, Instagram, Facebook pages, you want to tell them where they can find your films at?
Yeah, seraph.film is our website, and everything is linked. Everything is linkable from there as far as social media, Twitter, Seraph Films, Facebook, Seraph Films. So
cool. Yeah, and we'll put all the links in our show notes and the blog post that we put up for folks. And thanks again, Gene, for coming on. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
To the bumper.